I'd very much like to welcome onto the show our guest for today, Mr. Alan Ronald.
Hi.
Al, obviously we've worked together on a couple of movies. We've worked together on the Death Tales movies, both Bordello Death Tales and what ended up being released in this country as Nazi Zombie Death Tales. If you're listening from America, it was called Angry Nazi Zombies over there. But yeah, we've worked together on those. But you've also had a couple of solo feature credits. You wrote and directed a fantastic movie called Jesus versus the Messiah, which I'd like to talk about in a little bit. Folks out there, if you haven't seen Jesus versus the Messiah, you really, really need to. But we'll kind of get into that a bit further down the line. And you also directed a movie called Chinese Burns, which it absolutely pains me to say I haven't seen. Anyway, welcome very much to the show, Al.
Hi, nice to be here.
So yeah. Jesus versus the Messiah.
Thank you for that intro. You've reminded me of the things I have done, which is always nice.
Jesus versus the Messiah was your first sort of writer-director credit. Can you tell us a little bit about that project and kind of how that one came about? And a little bit for people who may not have yet caught it, because it's great, how you particularly see that movie.
Thanks. Yeah, how did it come about? Well, let me think back. It's quite some time ago now. It was the energy that every filmmaker gets for that first project.
Yeah.
Has built up for a long time, and then it's the big step into making a film. It was that, basically. It started off as a joke, as many of my projects do, it seems. Which just, basically, the entire thing was an experiment, just to see if we could. So even the script was an experiment. When I wrote the script, I wasn't really, it wasn't really intended to be made. It was just to see if I could write a script.
Right.
That maybe changed about halfway through when you start to think, maybe this could work. So yeah, it's kind of just a building thing. There was no moment where you're like, I'm definitely doing this. It was just, I have to make this film now. It just happens. And that was the first one. So there's a lot of energy in that film.
And so for people who've never heard of the movie before, because it's for all our stuff is obviously fairly obscure. It's the kind of nature of micro-budget filmmaking that sometimes people will happen across it or whatever. For people who are completely unfamiliar with it, other than that incredibly striking title, can you pitch Jesus versus the Messiah to them?
Well, it's been a long time since I've had to pitch it. But basically, it's a man who claims to be Jesus, who supposedly was not crucified when he was supposed to be, and so now there's a hitman called the Messiah out to make sure that he's crucified like he's supposed to be. It's with hilarious results. Sometimes.
And this was all filmed in Scotland, yeah?
Yeah, we shot it all in Scotland. Tiny crew, like 5 of us on the crew, I think,
right.
At any one time. And yeah, it's kind of it's got a bit of Western in it, because I love Westerns. It's a bit of a road movie at points. It's got a bit of a chase vibe, and yeah, it's like everything I love.
Did you worry about
together.
Having something with so kind of strong a potentially contentious religious theme to it, or was that something that kind of drove you towards it?
Well, I was brought up religious, so it was natural that I would eventually veer towards that. But to be honest, I never really thought it would be controversial, because I don't really think about those things. I just enjoyed playing with the characters. To me, it was just its own thing. I never really thought about it too much. Obviously, people pointed it out to me, and I kind of thought, well, hopefully it will be controversial. That would be lovely. But there's
so
really
you were
nothing
phoning up
in
the
it.
Daily Mail, and you were,
Yeah.
Excuse me, I've heard about the most offensive concept for a film.
Anything for publicity. But not really. Like, honestly, it was just like, people don't really believe me when I say it wasn't supposed to be controversial. But I don't think it is that controversial. I think the title is probably the only part that's designed to be controversial.
Right.
I think when people watch it, they will realise that it's actually not. In fact, I was quite careful that it could kind of be read any way you like.
Right, okay. And I mean, you say that you were brought up in a kind of religious environment, and the theme of today's episode is using your fears as strengths. Is it something to do with your relationship with religion from kind of early on that has then fed through into that spurt of creativity? Is it a case of using your fears as strengths, or is it a more distant thing than that?
Yeah, I think it probably is. I mean, I don't know if it's so much fears, but it's definitely, I suppose it's the stories that I was told when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So as a storyteller, you automatically veer back towards the same ideas that are in some of the stories you've read. So
Can you give us an example? What kind of ideas was it? Was it stuff that was troubling? Is it that the imagery of Sunday school kind of got under your skin, and then as you became an adult, you kind of went back and examined that in some way, or
yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean,
the whole
I wouldn't
crucifixion image is just a creepy ass image.
Yeah, I mean, I spent so long sitting in a church looking at a large, sculpture of a crucified man. Like, there's no way when you become a filmmaker that you're not going to go, oh, that's pretty good. You're going to use that.
It's a strong image.
That seems like that might be an enduring image. So yeah, but I mean, the thing I'm most proud of, I don't know if that was me working through, because I made it when I was quite young, so maybe that was working through some of the religious leftovers, you know. I don't know. I didn't really think about it, but I know that when we shot some of that stuff, by the time we got to... Oh, that's a spoiler, isn't it? Never mind, fuck it. There is a crucifixion in the film.
I think you stuck it in the trailer, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's fine. But by the time we got to that, I didn't feel like it was drawing from that image, but it felt like I'd kind of owned that image, just for me, not necessarily, but that I'd created something that led to this image that made sense, and it was my thing. So maybe, a little bit of the I don't know if it's fear or just the stuff that you've absorbed over your life, or particularly your childhood, rather, is just, it's got to come out sometime.
I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but coincidentally, my first... I tried to shoot a movie before Trash House, which was my actual first movie, that you worked on as well, my DP. But I don't know why I'm telling you that.
I know, thanks, I'd forgotten.
But before Trash House, I shot a kind of uncompleted thing called Jinxing Mosquitoes, which was meant to be my first movie, and it all kind of fell apart about 80% in. But we crucified someone during that. And not literally, not actually, but it was one of those moments as a filmmaker. What happened was we decided that we'd shoot it on. There was one of the cast had a flat that had a flat roof, and we thought, all right, well, let's go up onto this flat roof. And I can't even remember, somehow someone built the crucifix for us, and I hadn't seen it until the time we turned up for the shoot. But it was a night shoot, and so so this crucifix was put on this flat roof of the, overlooking Southend seafront. And then by the time they'd lit it, we drove up to the location and looked up. It's like, oh shit! You could see this illuminated cross with this guy on it for miles, and everyone was like piling out the nightclubs. This was on like a Saturday night at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and it was just one of those.
Sounds amazing.
The reality of, oh no, we are sort of crucifying someone on a rooftop right now, and it's only when it's visible for miles around that it sort of landed home for me. But that was one of my we've all got our
crucifixion stories. Never trust anyone who hasn't crucified at least one guy.
Exactly, right? and our one was holding a nail gun. That was the idea, that he was sort of self-crucifying and couldn't get the last nail in, which I think is actually a young one's joke.
It's good, though. It's good.
But we couldn't get a nail gun at the last minute, and so he was holding a drill. And it's that sort of first movie thing where you think, I'm sure that'll be fine. And then every now and again, I've looked at like stills from it or whatever. I go, that's clearly a drill. What's he doing with a drill? Anyway, neither here nor there.
Make sense.
So what happened to Jesus versus the Messiah? It came through the scripting process, which you say was fairly kind of improvised to a degree, in terms that you were making up as you went along.
Well, the first script that I wrote for Jesus versus the Messiah was just like the most ridiculous script you'll ever read. It's the first feature script that I've ever written. Right. So I just went to town on it. I just threw in, there was gun battles, there's a fight in space.
Was a Jesus fight in space?
Jesus fighting the Messiah in space.
That's amazing.
I think they blow up the London Eye, or the Thames goes on fire at some point. Yeah, it was just the most ridiculous script I could possibly come up with. But just to get through it, but through doing that, I started writing. It's the first script is the one I still think that you learn the most writing.
Yeah.
And so doing that, I realised that, you start with the concept, which is ludicrous, but as you start writing it, the characters start to kind of come to life. So I started to actually ask questions about them and get a bit more into the characters. And then at some point, I realised that was interesting, and that I didn't need all the, I mean, sure, space battles would have been cool. Maybe one day I would do the Hollywood remake where I get my space battles. But
absolutely.
The fact is that both the fact that I couldn't do it and the fact that I didn't need it, because the characters kind of stood up. I think that's the point when I started to think, well, maybe I could actually make this, because, you don't need a budget to create characters.
No, exactly.
Maybe I can do that. So yeah, it was a weird experience. Like I said, started as a joke, became like just a stupid script, and then I sort of picked away what was in it that was good, or that I thought was good. And it's that thing where you just think, right, I got to do this now. I've come this far. I need to keep going. It's just one of those. I mean, suddenly it's one of those where you find yourself on set the first day and go, fuck, we're actually doing it. When did this happen? It was one of those.
I think it's a great film. I think it's a really, really cracking flick. And it's so unusual for just as a kind of micro budget first feature, a kind of a religious Western shot in Scotland. It's not, what I mean. I can't think of another first feature like it that's doing the same things or trying to do the same things. And I mean, are you still proud of it? It's obviously it's a few years ago now. When did you shot it? 2004, 2005?
I think we shot it 2006 or 7.
Right. Okay.
So around about then. But like I said, I am hugely proud of it still. I still think it's great. And I still think that at some point it'll find an audience somehow. You're right. So I'm always working on that. And it's one of those things, you make plans for a film to come out. It doesn't always work out. We've been close a few times with it.
Right.
And it has been out, did a few festivals, not many, but, people have seen it.
Yeah.
But it hasn't had a sort of widespread audience.
Will you be going the VOD route? Is it likely to be hitting Amazon Prime at any point soon? Can people kind of put it in their Google alerts? That's the hope. Yeah, that we're working on that just now. So that would be nice if we could get it up on there. So, fantastic. That you will prod the crazy nest, though. Of course, at that point, if it's been a movie that so far the only people who've been exposed to it are people who have sorted out, for want of another word. If you're going to get the crazies surfing through Amazon Prime and seeing that title, and that's going to be, I don't know. It's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you just delete, it'll be fine. Yeah, well, I was careful. I don't think that there's anything... And I've actually shown the film to people who are religious, family, friends who I thought, well, let's see if they have a problem with this, and they never do. They get caught up in the story. And it's the reason there's a quote at the beginning of the film, which I'm failing to remember right now, but it's very, very clever. But I put it there. It's the letter... oh my God! The religion of one age is the literary. Oh my God! I can't remember the quote.
That's a great quote.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, I think he could have been a bit more concise with it.
Yeah.
But the reason it's there is basically the idea that these things get used as characters. It's like Thor.
Yeah.
To
absolutely.
Me, Jesus is no different from Thor. Now there's a movie.
I hope he'll be in the new Avengers, actually.
That would be great if Jesus joined the Avengers. I think they're missing a trick not including him, frankly.
So
he'd be great at parties. Actually, Stark would get on well with him.
You what? Sorry, the Skype went dodgy then. What'd you say?
That was a great... I love that on Skype, when you try and say something funny, you just get that awkward silence and it doesn't get picked up. Moving on.
So, So what happened after Jesus versus the Messiah? I know that you've written a bunch of scripts, and I sort of read some of the stuff that you've written over the years, and then the projects that you've chosen or the ways that you've gone haven't necessarily been the ones that I was expecting you to. I know I've read some stuff that you wrote a few years ago, and then Chinese Burns from about 2012. That was the next feature. How did that come about, and what is that? Would you broadly class that as horror or not at all?
Not at all, really. I suppose it does have a connection with horror in that the film is about a horror actor.
Right.
So, there's it touches on it slightly. But no, it's definitely not a horror film. I didn't write that film. I rewrote it. I wrote the final version.
Okay.
But that kind of came about. I'm trying to think if we did the Death Tales films in between now. I've lost track of my own time.
Bordello Death Tales we shot in the summer of 2008, and it didn't come out on DVD until 2012.
I think
that's right. And
really? Oh my god!
Or it might have been 2011. It came out on DVD, and then the second Death Tales movie I think we did in the opening weeks of 2012. I think.
So this ties into the fear theme. Is that the truth is, honestly, after making Jesus versus the Messiah and putting so much energy into it, I don't know how long it took to finish. And even then, I didn't feel like it was really finished. I've since re-edited it, and it's the only director's cut that's 20 minutes shorter, possibly, but it works much better. But at the time, we were unprepared to make a film in terms of what you do after you've made a film.
Okay.
All the energy was focused on make it good, get it finished, and then once we got there, we had no idea what to do with it.
Sure.
So, I mean, you overcome stuff. We managed to sort some things out, but it did instill a bit of a fear in me of making films. Just pure. I don't know if fear is the right word, really, but you put so much into it, or I put so much into it, that I was a little bit scared to put that much into another project.
Right.
I think.
Okay.
Because what if no one sees it? That's how I felt about that film. The Death Tales thing kind of shook me out of that a little bit, because they were short and we knew how we were going to, there was a plan in place for that. So I could put my energy into it without it being a whole feature, which is partly, I think, why all of us did it to an extent. So that kind of reignited it a little bit for me.
I should probably throw in here for any listeners who haven't shockingly seen our Death Tales movies. Bordello Death Tales is an anthology movie where I wrote and directed one segment, Al wrote and directed one segment, and the third segment was written and directed, it was actually the opening segment, was written and directed by Jim Eves, who we're hoping to get on the show at some point. We came together and shot 1 or 2 days with us all there, and then we went away and shot our movies effectively independently and then stitched them all together. There was a kind of overarching design for them. I think Bordello Death Tales is still on iTunes. The second one, which we shot as Battlefield Death Tales, but then got retitled as Nazi Zombie Death Tales in the UK, Angry Nazi Zombies in the US, Nazi Zombie Battleground, I think, in Germany. So that just never had the same title.
Disclaimer, may not include any angry Nazi zombies.
This is true.
Little disclaimer there for anyone seeking it out, I feel.
And I must admit, I'm sure that the American distributors will forgive me for saying this. I have a sneaking suspicion it's called Angry Nazi Zombies because that begins with an A, and therefore it shows up earlier in alphabetical listings. Because I think Angry Nazi Zombies is a tautology, and I think if you've got the word Nazi and the word zombie in there, angry is a bit superfluous. I don't think you need that. But someone disagreed somewhere along the line, so that's what that's gone out. But anyway, yeah, sorry, you were saying about how that kind of shook the cobwebs off.
I think, like any art or any creativity, it's fucking terrifying to do that stuff. So anyone who does it is overcoming the fear of putting themselves out there, or opening themselves up to criticism or whatever it is they're doing. So, that, especially I think with filmmakers, because you can't do it overnight. It's a big project, and it takes you a long time, and you've got to be invested in it for a while. And I just wasn't really ready to do that again. But the Death Tales kind of shook me out of that a little bit. And so I just threw myself into those, really. I mean, I love doing those.
Your chapter on Bordello Death Tales, which is called Stitch Girl, it's black and white. It's a kind of James Whale homage, I think it's fair to say. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Definitely. Yeah, that's another. I can't really think how it came out. I think it started. I just thought I wanted to do something different, and basically, again, we're talking about the stuff you soak up as a kid coming out. In this case, I'd done religion. In this case, it was all the pop culture that I loved. So like just old horror movies, and it's very Tim Burton, like intentionally so. All that kind of stuff. Just a dark comedy, which I hadn't. I mean, Jesus versus the Messiah has a bit of that, but this is completely, dark comedy fairy tale. And in this one, it was more about creating a sort of cartoony, sort of other world to see if I could do that, because Jesus versus the Messiah, although it's got Western tropes, it's pretty much set in the real world, more or less. And I just wanted to see if I could do something visual, like different. So that was kind of the challenge with this, and I love doing that. I think it worked. Yeah. Hopefully. That was I tried to keep that one simple, which is almost impossible. And
what about for Nazi Zombie Death Tales? Your chapter there is introduces to Harriet Price.
Yep, Harriet Price.
It is Harriet Price, who's
1940s.
a kind of supernatural investigator, for want of a better word. Wonderful character, works really nicely, and that is the closest, I think, that Nazi Zombie Death Tales gets to having a Nazi zombie in it. It's a Nazi ghost, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose he is angry as well, so...
So where did that kind of come from, in terms of if Jesus versus the Messiah was you investigating the fears of your religious upbringing, your Bordello Death Tales chapter was kind of, as you say, going through the pop culture and the stuff that you absorbed that way. What were you working out for the Nazi Zombie Death Tales chapter?
I just love Ghostbusters. That one, I think, was actually... That one felt a lot freer, because it was me and my friend Dave Lee, and we were just talking about it, and the idea came up. I really, again, can't remember how it came up, but we started to develop the idea of this 1940s ghost hunter, and I loved the idea. Really, really loved it.
Yeah.
I feel like with Harriet, it's maybe the other way around, and that film was the start of exploring something rather than the end of it. Because I've been constantly writing stuff to try and, do more with that character.
Yeah.
I don't know what yet. It's taken on many forms. So, at some point, she'll definitely be back at some point, because that film, it kind of came from nowhere, and it just felt like, the start of an idea rather than the end of it. So that was cool. That's the first time that's happened, where I thought I could write loads of stories for this character, and have been compulsively since, trying to get the right one or just get an outlet for it. So
fantastic. I want to see them. I need to more Harriet Price. The world definitely needs more Harriet Price.
Yeah, well, I've meddled with a lot of ways of getting Harriet out through radio and possibly a book. It just hasn't it hasn't crossed the starting line quite yet. It's one of those projects where you're just, one day I'll wake up and go, oh, it's today, is it? And then that'll be the day.
Now, one of the things that we do on this show, we do ask everybody to kind of recommend an independent horror that they weren't involved with, one that maybe somebody might not have ever heard of, but something that you can kind of say, this is an interesting gem.
But I always think it's worth checking out filmmakers' body of work sometimes, rather than just individual films, especially on low budgets, because some things just don't work, and that's not necessarily a failure. Where it's more about the ideas and various other things. So I think, you know, people like yourself and MJ Dixon and people like that, people just need to go and have a look.
MJ Dixon's another really interesting one, and hopefully we'll get him on the show one day. Is there any of his in particular that you'd kind of push people towards?
Well, like all of his are pretty. They're all in. He's got his own universe going on. Which
yeah,
is
absolutely,
cool.
Which is brilliant. I mean, that's one of those things. It's fantastic to have a movie that leads to another movie, leads to another movie. So, fears as strengths. Biggest fear that you have yet to overcome. Is there still something that's nagging there, or have you done this? Have you worked through all the issues you need to in terms of celluloid, and or is there still scripts coming out of you? Do you scare yourself when you write?
Sometimes, yeah. That would scare yourself when you write. I like that. That's the idea, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think for me, it's I'm investigating other ways to tell stories at the moment. I still want to make films, but I wouldn't say that's my priority right now.
Right, gotcha.
Necessarily. At the moment, I have film ideas that may or may not see the light of day, but
you've been doing more prose writing as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I wrote a Dark Shadows story for Big Finish recently. That's probably
fantastic.
The biggest thing I've done. So I think that comes out in May. So that was amazing to write for, because it was perfect for me. So it's kind of a spooky love story. But that was cool as well, writing for some of the characters from Dark Shadows, which I've never done before either. So that was really cool. I'm quite excited about that.
You wrote a Doctor Who story for a kind of unofficial compendium that came out, am I right?
Oh yeah, that was for Seasons of War, which was a charity book. So I got to write, it's the War Doctor meets Don Quixote, which was cool. I don't know where people can get that, but I'm sure you can get hold of it somewhere. That was just the coolest thing ever to write. I had really good fun writing that, as you would.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was cool. And that kind of, both those things have kind of kicked me into maybe feeling like writing prose and stuff is a quicker way to get ideas out. That's the fear that I'm not over, is I have a lot of ideas, and not bragging, I just have a spaghetti head of ideas, and it's finding ways to get them out. And for me, it has to be a really good idea to justify a film, because it's such a huge chunk of time and effort.
Yeah.
And I just haven't had those ideas lately, really, not strong enough to push me to do it. But you know, not that I'm not busy, I'm still writing all the time, just in different genres, or different mediums rather.
Absolutely.
Which is cool.
Well, man, I hope that more of those ideas, I hope that you find one that you do grab onto and kind of that seems a big enough idea to take it out into the features, because, as I say, I think Jesus vs. the Messiah is an amazing flick. I love your stuff, and, you know, obviously maybe one day we'll do another Death Tales movie, who knows. But
you never know. I'm still making films because I work for a wrestling company called Progress.
Oh, cool.
And we have a TV series that we do called Freedom's Road, which is mixing, it's kind of professional wrestling with short films.
Oh, nice.
So a little bit of drama behind the scenes and stuff like that. And that's keeping me making films at the moment, because we're trying to do things that no one's done. So there's horror storylines, and there's a time traveling surfboard and stuff like that. So that's keeping me busy at the moment, and that's great because I can just throw ideas at that and see what sticks. And it's wrestling, so if it doesn't stick, you just move on, do something else. So yeah, people can see that. That's what I'm directing at the moment quite frequently. So I guess I'm still making films. I'm just pretending I'm not. At the moment, that's on Demand Progress, which is their on-demand channel.
Cool.
And it goes live on Facebook at, I think, every second Thursday. So you can see it there. If you like wrestling and you like haunted masks and time-traveling surfboards, then...
And if you don't, there's something wrong with you!
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's definitely the show for you.
Al, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. It really means a lot, and I love your work, and long may it continue, sir.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to ruining one of your sets again soon.
It'll happen. Take care, dude. Cheers.